I'm Tina Fordham, and you're watching The Navigator, where we talk about the geopolitical risks that matter most for business leaders and global markets. What do we mean when we talk about geopolitics? The lack of a common definition makes it even trickier to assess what geopolitical risk is, let alone to price it. So let's start out now by defining the term. Here's what geopolitics is not. It's not news headlines or current events. So reading or watching more news on TV isn't going to be much help in improving your business preparedness for geopolitical risk. In political science, when we talk about geopolitics, we mean the things that countries do to project power beyond their borders, whether in an orderly way, like by imposing tariffs or trade sanctions, or a disorderly way, like espionage, cyber attacks, or cross-border conflict. Fundamentally, geopolitics is about the projection of power and attempts by countries to maximize their competitive advantage. Often these power grabs are incremental, and they take place in the gray zone, below the radar of market risks. If you've been following our work, you know that our core thesis is that we've entered a new geopolitical risk supercycle. It's defined by more frequent disruptions that are increasingly not absorbed by traditional buffers like liquidity from central banks or diplomacy. The implication is that your business strategy, regardless of your geography or sector, needs to be viewed through a geopolitical lens. So now let's focus on some of the known knowns ahead, our second quarter political signposts. This month we'll see elections in India, where the focus will be on the scale of Modi's victory on the back of India's continued economic juggernaut, and also elections in South Africa, where the big question is whether the ANC, which has ruled the country for 30 years, will be able to hang on to its majority. Turning now to our Navigator watch list, we see the same three risks at play as last month, so no change in the overall trend. But I've also highlighted the geomagnetic solar storms here. This is what produced the incredible sightings of the aurora borealis last week. But an intensification of these storms could be a significant exogenous risk event. In our last episode, I warned that we could be entering a danger zone where combatants in the conflicts in the Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, and the South China Sea, as well as non-state actors, are likely to try to take advantage of the pre-US election period to extend and consolidate their gains before a possible change of government in Washington. So prepare for a renewed Russian offensive in Ukraine and an uptick in Russian attacks in the European sphere, as well as increased friction in the South China Sea. I wrote earlier about the low likelihood of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and you can find more about that on our website. On U.S. elections, now 6 months away, there was a lot of press coverage about two new polls from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Both put Trump ahead in most of the swing states. That's the 6 to 7 states that are considered to be at play. But drawing upon our PQ framework, political quotient, you will already know that polls for U.S. elections 6 months out have very little value as predictors, and the margin of error in these polls is between 3 to 5 percentage points. So while the results are fodder for pundits and make headlines, I think the most interesting thing is how stable the support is for both Trump and Biden. It is just not moving that much month to month. Let's move now to Vox Populi risk, my term for shifting and more volatile public opinion. The campus protests in the U.S. against the war in Gaza have attracted a lot of attention, but how widespread is that sentiment among American youth? I was struck by this survey from Generation Lab, where healthcare and funding for education came out at the top of the list of student concerns, and the Middle East conflict in 9th place. The anti-war protests could certainly still prove divisive for Joe Biden and fracture the Democratic coalition, but this survey suggests that they aren't yet the most pressing concern for American young people. Another point on Vox Populi risk is the popular protests in Georgia, the country, not the U.S. state, against a proposed new law on registering so-called foreign agents. Georgia is a small country, fewer than 4 million people, but it's of great geostrategic significance. The dispute going on in Georgia against perceived Russian influence harkens back to the spark that ignited Ukraine's Orange Revolution and eventually the Kremlin's move to invade Ukraine. It remains to be seen which side will prevail in Georgia, but in the context of the war in Ukraine and fears of an expanding Russian sphere of influence, what happens in Tbilisi has implications far beyond its borders. There's a lot more to say, but we're out of time. Do sign up for our free private newsletter if you'd like to keep in touch with our views. And remember the words of Louis Pasteur, "Fortune favors the brave, but chance favors the prepared mind." Thanks for watching The Navigator.